activist. Alicia Wiesel is one of our board members and an incredible friend to me and a mentor, and just someone that really every time he speaks, everyone's like, oh, that was the wisest thing I've ever heard, which maybe is an inherited trait.
Friend part is true for sure.
I'm super happy, and we're just waiting for a second for Ashanti Golar, who is, I think, the CEO of Emerge. Actually, maybe we'll open it because Ashanti is, oh, can we pull Deutsch in here, yes. Lauren?
Yes, no problem.
I don't know if Ashanti is CEO, president, okay. All right, hi, Lauren. Everyone's in their Zionist swag. Okay, so let's open it up.
Awesome, okay.
Please make sure.
Look, son.
Please make sure that you're muted.
Yes.
Oh. Hello.
Thank you. So we wanted to do this in meeting mode instead of webinar mode because we know how much people want to see faces, see people, feel solidarity. And so I want to not even pin this. I want everyone to be. But please do mute yourselves and don't take yourselves off mute. We would really appreciate that. Lauren, can we mute everyone, please? Except for.
Don't think we can mute everyone unless we mute everyone, because it's not panelists.
Someone just emailed me that the Zoom link isn't working, so let me just send it to her.
Oh, geez. No, we have.
It says 100. Okay, so luckily we are recording this. Lauren, please press record.
Recording.
All right. So I'm so happy to be, I'm so devastated by the circumstances, but so happy to be surrounded by friends and Zionists, people who are all processing the trauma that I am as an American Jew, as someone deeply committed to the advancement of the progressive agenda in America, and as a very proud Zionist whose heart right now is in Israel with our community, with our family and friends who are facing rocket threats and are facing another existential crisis. And we're going to talk about a lot of things today, hear from allies, and have an opportunity to engage with each other. But I would love to introduce, just to sort of kick us off, an incredible friend, a Zionist board member, Alicia Wiesel.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And it's great to be talking to all of our friends and allies and activists today. Folks may want to stay muted if you're not speaking. Look, what a terrible week, and it's for those of us who can't tear our eyes off of our phones as we're watching every new piece of information come across the wire from what's happening in Israel, it's been very difficult. And I guess what I want to talk about today is how important it is in moments like this, when not only do we see people that we care about, many of us American Jews have family and close friends living in Israel where rockets are falling. Not only do we feel their physical danger, not only do we feel their emotional trauma, but we also feel what it's like to be ignored, misrepresented, when you see the media really struggle to say certain things that we perceive to be truths, and you see them struggle to say it out loud. And you wonder, like, how did we get to this place where things that seem so obvious to us our pain seems so obvious to us, and yet we feel challenged. We feel challenged in speaking it out loud because people don't want to hear it. We watch newspapers, we watch social media, and I'll go right to the point. What is happening in Israel right now is terrorists are looking to kill Israeli civilians, as many as possible. Put a line under it. That is what's actually happening. There is a violent terrorist organization named Hamas, and their charter, if you were to read it, and they revised it to get some of the most hateful, obviously, and
Alicia, you got to unmute yourself.
Alicia got Lauren. We gotta
I just got muted. Where did I get cut off? Tell me when you heard me or not.
just like 4 seconds ago.
4 seconds ago. I just got muted. You think Hamas is this terrorist organization, and if you were to actually go and read its initial charter, I think from 1987, you will find that it blames Jews around the world for everything from alcohol and drugs to pornography, and it describes how there has to be a worldwide jihad to eliminate the Jew and put him back in his place. Now, you'll find that Hamas covered up some, but believe me, there's plenty left in the most recent charter, in the 2008 charter, I think. But you'll just make no mistake, these are people who hate Jews. These are people for whom the concept of there being a Jew that can defend him or herself is intolerable. And the idea that Israel for the first time exists so that Jews in the world have somewhere to go when we're in danger is completely unacceptable. So these are terrorists. They're launching rockets. 25 to 30% of the rockets that they're launching are falling on their own people. They don't care. Their rockets are falling on Israeli Arabs. One of the first victims was a 16-year-old Arab teenager. They don't care. Their goal is to strike fear. Their goal is to say, under no condition will we ever tolerate that there be a Jewish state by our side. They want nothing less than the destruction of who we are and the destruction of our people. And if I sound a little angry, I will tell you that the way I'm processing my trauma right now is I'm feeling pretty angry. I'm feeling pretty angry that the world sits there and judges Israel. The world sits there and judges us and says, how dare you defend ourselves? Really? How dare we defend ourselves? Our troops are working to the highest moral standard that they possibly can, surgically striking where we see the rockets are coming from, doing as much as we can to avoid civilian casualties. Israel, for those of you who don't know that, will drop a very weak bomb, typically, on the roof of a building where they know there is terrorist activity to give civilians time to leave. They give them time to leave before they strike people and machinery that is being used to fire rockets into Israel. So the way that I'm processing this is tremendous distress, tremendous anger at the refusal of the world to see it clearly when it's our people that's under attack. And, I wish I had more to offer maybe today than my frustration and my anger, but I give it to you honestly. And I will tell you that one of the things that helps is when I do talk to people who they may not agree with Israel's politics. They may see different paths forward for how we will ultimately get to peace. And there's so much room for discussion on all of these things. But there have been people who have come to me and said, oh my God, we can't imagine what you're going through. And to hear that is one of the few things that is incredibly powerful and helpful. So I can't tell you how much I and the rest of the Zionist team appreciate that we have friends and allies who, even if they don't, come from a multiplicity of political viewpoints on what the world should look like and how we should get there, are able to actually see us for a moment, not only in our pain, but in the way that we are being misrepresented on the world stage. Amanda, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted me to address, but those are sort of my opening thoughts for this group.
I just wanted everyone to hear from you. And I think that you sharing your pain is critically important. And I think there is a lot of different pain. I think what so many people in our community are feeling right now is that even putting what's actually going on the ground in Israel, and also is happening in trauma to the Palestinians as well, is that we are facing a barrage of anti-Semitism online. And that the way that every time there's a conflagration in the Middle East, the way that American Jews feel is that no one really has our back. And I have to say that the way I feel right now is the most vulnerable and alone that I have ever felt as an American Jew. And I know that is a privileged position, that I, that I'm a white presenting person in America. I know that so many other people that I care about have never felt that they can be safe and secure in America, but I am privileged and have had the luxury of having felt safe, and right now I really don't. And I really feel like no matter what I do, and I know that there are so many other people on the call who have always cared so much about showing up for others and in participating in the social justice issues that matter to us here in America, that no matter what allyship we show, that we feel alone right now, and that people don't have the courage. And I understand it, because it takes Herculean courage to stand with the Jewish community right now. So part of the reason for this call is making sure that everyone knows you are not alone. There is a community here. We will continue in our activism. We will continue in our proud Zionism, and we will do the best that we can to fight the narrative that says that we as Zionists can't be progressives, or that we as Zionists have to abandon our own community. We're not allowed to be a Zionist if we care about social justice. Actually, Zionism is the original progressive movement, and the Jewish people are a long enduring persecuted minority community, and we have to stand together now, and we also have to stand with the many allies that do exist and do understand us and do care for us. And we are so excited to have some of them with us today.
Can I just say one more thing before I pop off, Amanda, if that's all right? I would just say, for those who are feeling frustrated and like, how are we going to reclaim this dialogue? How are we going to get our voices out there? I think there will be opportunities in the coming days and weeks. And I ask you all to keep your eyes open for them. And I think that there will be opportunities where we will need to bring in all of the allies that we have marched and stood and protested and spoken up on their behalves. There will be opportunities to bring them in. And please keep your eyes open and your ear to the ground, because I think it's very important that Israel hear from Americans just how we have their back. And I think it's very important that the Biden administration, and thank God they've been appropriately measured and supportive of Israel so far, but I think here that we appreciate them as well as they do that. So that's it. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. We just need to, we hit our max capacity, everyone. So I'm really sorry. First of all, I really need everyone to please mute if you are not me or a speaker. Thank you. We pulled this together so quickly, and we didn't know that our Zoom had a max capacity. And so one of our speakers is not able to get on. So Alicia's jumping off. Just please, actually, Suhail, do you mind doing your piece?
Okay. They delivered our Sure. Right.
Everyone, please mute yourself if you are not speaking.
Controversial.
I think
I'm literally now going through 100 people and moving them. I'm so sorry.
no worries.
I don't
So
use Zoom. It is. I can't find the Zoom that is speaking. Okay. Now, Suhail, please go ahead.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks to Zioness, and thanks, Lauren, for getting the link. I'm new to all of you, so I'll do a couple words of introduction and then share some of my thoughts. So my name is Suhail Khan. I live in Washington, D.C., been here for about 26 years, working primarily in the political arena. I was born in Colorado, raised in California. My parents were immigrants from South India who came to Wyoming and then Colorado in the 60s. And like many immigrants, came here seeking opportunity, educational opportunities, economic opportunities, just the idea of kind of living in a place where they could have the freedom to become who they wanted to be. I grew up as in a very devout Muslim family. And even though my parents were immigrants from South India, just to give you some sense of our sense of kind of ties to the conflict that we're talking about right now, in our living room was a huge photograph. I'm talking large, maybe 8 feet by 5 feet of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And that was something that was very central to my upbringing. And indeed, my family took me to Israel, to Jerusalem in 1995 for the first time on a family trip. And that's well before I ever had any opportunity to travel to, say, Mecca or places like that. So I grew up with a very close kinship to that region, learning about the region, meeting Palestinian Americans growing up, and then of course having an opportunity to visit for the first time in 1995. And in those times in the 80s and 90s when I grew up, for the American Muslim community, we saw the conflict strictly through the Palestinian lens, and in many ways, our relationships with the Jewish American community was through that lens as well. Even though individually, you know, my father's PhD advisor happened to be Jewish. I remember my mom, when she was in college, when I was young, her study partner happened to be Jewish. And as Amanda will attest to, you know, I grew up eating, you know, Jewish foods and celebrating holidays. But when it came to the political and particularly issues related to the Middle East, we shifted our narratives to the lens, seeing the world through the lens of the Palestinians. And I realized soon when I came to Washington, D.C. After law school and began working in the political arena, that the narratives, what we've already kind of mentioned, the idea of the narratives, that there was not only a conflict, but the narratives were something that I felt were getting in the way of any peaceful resolution. Even though in 1995, when I first went, it was after Oslo and there was some sense of hope, but I began to see that sense of hope on both sides begin to crumble for a host of reasons. And I began to really think that there has to be a way for the American Muslim community to form a kinship with the American Jewish community, to somehow begin to at least create the capacity for a dialogue. I wasn't, you know, foolish enough to think that we would somehow bring peace to the land, because only the people who live there can actually effectuate that peace. But I felt as Israel's strongest ally, and as free people living here in the United States, as Americans, that I had a moral duty to at least try to be one of those agents for positive dialogue and support and change towards some type of peaceful resolution, whether that was around the corner back in the 90s, as we perhaps naively thought it would be, or if it's something that would be years or sadly even decades in the making. And so as part of that, I was on another trip to Israel, to Jerusalem, to the West Bank. And I was traveling with a rabbi friend of mine who I'm very close to, a Holocaust survivor. And as we were discussing issues with Israelis, with people within Israel, with folks that were settlers, with Palestinians, people living in refugee camps, we were having the very typical arguments and discussions, and the narratives were clashing, as they often do. And on one of those trips, I was sitting with I consider him a mentor. His name is Rabbi Jack Bemperat. I said, Rebbe, what can we do as Americans who are just visiting here? What can we do to help begin to heal some of these divides? And he said to me, it would mean a lot for American Muslims to recognize the suffering of the Jewish people, to recognize the Holocaust. And I said, well, what does that look like? How would that be done? And he said it would mean a lot for prominent American imams from the United States to travel to Auschwitz, to meet with survivors and to recognize the Holocaust, what happened there. Particularly, you have to realize, many of you recall, leaders in Iran and others were not only ignoring it, but in some cases even having conferences, denying the Holocaust or even lauding what happened there. And we've seen the very vile and disgusting types of comments that are made by political leaders, particularly on the internet. And so I promised then and there, when we were in that refugee camp, sitting on the back of one of those buses, that I would help get the most prominent American imams to go to Auschwitz, and that we would work on that trip. That was in 2009 when we brought it together. We got support from the German government from the US government. And we took a group of imams from all over the United States, younger, older, immigrant, American-born, African-American men and women, religious leaders. Most I invited to go because of their standing in the community. Some asked to come. One of them had asked to come because he, in fact, had made had questioned the validity of the Holocaust, had made comments that were anti-Semitic, and was beginning the process of learning the reality. And even though it was very controversial that we included him, I said to myself, this is our audience. These are the people that we want to come. We went, we made the trip. It was the first of its kind. We met with survivors. We went to Auschwitz and Dachau, and we had a very moving experience where we began that conversation, not only of recognizing what happened during the Holocaust, recognizing the murder of over 6 million Jews at the hands of the Nazis and the Holocaust, but also looking at it from today's worldview to realize that this is part of at least the conversation between our two communities, at least here in the United States, to begin working on how we can heal some divides and begin tackling current conflict. There was a subsequent trip in 2011 of imams from all over the globe, including Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Malaysia, India, Jordan, and several other countries. They likewise had a very moving and powerful visit. Like the imams from 2009, they issued a very powerful statement saying that not only did the 6 million Jews were they murdered, not only did this happen, but that any denial of or any minimization of what happened during the Holocaust is not only going against history, but going against the Islamic faith in of itself, because you are standing on a lie, and perpetuating a lie is against the Islamic faith of itself. It was very powerful. These imams in 2011 reiterated that statement. And then in 2020, right before the COVID shutdown, with the help of the American Jewish Committee, we made another trip taking imams from all over the globe, particularly imams from Saudi Arabia, to make that same powerful visit. I tell you a little bit about that history because that was very much a door opener, as it were, for institutional dialogue between the American Muslim and the American Jewish communities. There had been dialogue on a local level, on an individual level, by some progressive Muslims and progressive Jews, but from an institutional perspective, those trips were very much instrumental in opening up that dialogue. I should note, and I wanted to say it after, the positiveness that in 2009, the ADL and the AJC formally objected to those trips and were lobbying against the trip in 2009, to the point when we met with a chief rabbi in Warsaw. Before he came to meet with us, he said, I just got off the phone with my American friends and they said I shouldn't meet with you. The reason being that many thought in the ADL and the AJC that if you bring imams to Auschwitz, the world's cameras will be there, which they were, that they will turn around and denounce the Israeli government. Nothing of the sort happened. And to the contrary, it began the healing and the allyship of the two communities in the United States. And now, as Amanda pointed out, the American Jewish Committee, the ADL, and other organizations now have strong relations with very prominent national Muslim American organizations. This conflict in the Middle East, particularly the most recent conflict and violence that we're seeing, is very painful. And I was on a call this morning with my friends from both the Jewish and the Muslim communities as we were together commiserating about the violence and the loss of life there on the ground. I'll say in closing that you should know, as American Jews, that American Muslims are at pain of what's happening in the Holy Land, what's happening in Israel, the deaths of innocents in Israel at the hands of Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. And likewise, we also mourn for the loss of lives in the Palestinian cities and villages. This is a humanitarian conflict, and this is one that pains anybody of good conscience. But I will say that you should not feel alone, that there is great pain from the Muslim American community and a kinship with the American Jewish community. We may not agree on what may be the exact and granular solution to the conflict, but I can tell you that there, in my conversations with Muslim American leaders, with Muslim American people on the ground, there is little sympathy for what Hamas is doing in their indiscriminate shelling of Israeli cities and civilians who are losing their lives because of this indiscriminate killing, just as there is pain and grief for the Palestinians who are dying because of the ongoing conflict. So that I want to end on that note. I wish we had a solution at hand, but I think part of the solution is beginning this conversation. And so I'm grateful to Amanda and Zioness for bringing us together, for allowing me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you. And I look forward to hearing from the other speakers. Thank you.
Suhail, thank you so much for your incredible work and your allyship and what you did in bringing all those imams to Auschwitz. I know changed many lives and changed the trajectory of the relationship between our communities. And you've been just an extraordinary leader. I feel so privileged to know you. And thank you. I know it takes so much courage to be with us today. So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
I'm going to share my screen because we have Ashanti Golar, the president of Emerge America here, and she couldn't get into the Zoom. Let me share it right now. How do I do this? Well, now I don't know how to share my screen, so I can't share. I mean, I'm the host of this, and it won't let me share my screen. So I don't even know what to do. I don't know what to do. So I'm just gonna turn up the volume. It's not gonna work. I don't know what to do. I can't. It won't let me do it.
Well, if you can just tell everyone I am with them in solidarity.
They hear you. They hear you.
Oh, everyone can hear me.
Somehow they hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So I'm glad we can make it work. And hello, everyone. I'm Ashanti Golar. I'm the president of Emerge. And when Amanda reached out to me about this, I cleared my schedule because it was just really important for me to show up for my Jewish sisters today. You know, unfortunately, I've been showing up to a lot of these calls for my trans sisters, my Asian sisters. There is just a lot going on in the world. And it was just personally important to me that I let you all know how much I care and that there are a lot of people in the Black community, Black women who care as well and who are standing with you. For me, my relationship with the Jewish community and Jewish women has been strong ever since I started my political career. My first job in politics was given to me by Congresswoman Shelley Berkeley. And there were a lot of people she could have hired to be her field director, but she decided to hire the girl who was just volunteering for free to make sure that she got elected. And throughout my time in politics, some of my best relationships have been with Jewish women. Everything that's going on right now, I know that it is hard. And just also over the past few years in the United States with the rise of anti-Semitism that we've seen, I've been someone who has absolutely been speaking up and out against it because our community, our Jewish community, absolutely deserves respect, and there's no room for intolerance in this country. So I unfortunately do have to jump to another call. There was a lot more that I had wanted to say, but please know that I am thinking about you and I'm standing with you in solidarity, and I look forward to joining you all for future conversations.
They saw you. We figured out the share screen.
Oh,
so
great.
They could see. So everyone can see how beautiful Ashanti and check out what she's doing with Emerge America. It's extraordinary, necessary work for women and for all marginalized communities. So thank you, Ashanti. I know you have to jump, but I can't tell you how grateful we are to hear from you.
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda, for all you do. And thank you, everyone. I'm just truly glad I was able to spend a little bit of time with you all today.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. And now we have Manny Hool, the wonderful Manny Hool, who is an Indigenous rights activist and a truly extraordinary ally to the Jewish community.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank Amanda and everyone who's on this call first. We are you, first off, as the Jewish community and as progressive Zionists are in a tough spot right now. And I want you to know that I see you and I hear you. And I'll get more into that, but I really want to open up with a way that, as my people do, we open up everything. We open up with some words. Some people might call it a prayer. I'm going to say it first in my native language, Ojibwe, and then I'll translate for all of you here who don't speak it, which I assume is many of you. So, Giga nini wa, I see you. Api I nu jimo ni ang. As we are loved, we love others. As we are healed, we heal others. As we are related to you, we are related to one another. Prepare us all now. Computer screen. Nana ishini shina'an daga, bring peace to all our souls. So I want to center on that right now. There's a lot of stuff being spewed across social media. We are seeing so much anti-Semitic rhetoric. We are seeing historically erasive messaging. And it is painful not only for Jews who have had a history of living in diaspora for thousands of years, who were expelled from their native homelands, but have always prayed, next year in Jerusalem, may we return to the Temple Mount, right? This is your story. This is your history. And I guess what I want to try to bring to you today is that resonates with me. Coming from a native reservation and living as a native person in what is supposed to be my Indigenous homeland, I do not know if I will ever feel safe as a Native American walking down the streets in America. People don't often talk about it, but thousands of our people go missing every year and there's no follow-up. We face violence at extreme levels that nobody talks about because we are so often thought of in the history books. And for me, when I hear the story of the Jewish people in diaspora, who then were able to, after the Shoah, come home, that to me is the most miraculous story of Indigenous resiliency we have. And I know we're gonna have someone talk about it, but there is a lot of trauma that comes with that. And there's nothing that allies can say to make the pain go away. There's nothing that we can do besides try to offer a space to let you know that we hear you. I've been swiping through all of the participants on this call, seeing your faces and knowing that we are all here today because we feel conflicted, we feel pain. We want something more and something better. And what I want to offer is just that space to do that. I don't have too much to really say. I think that really all of you who are members of Zioness are really the leaders at this moment. I want you to know that if you need someone to reach out to, I am on Twitter. You know, I see people from Twitter on here. Like, I'm there. Reach out. Like, we'll be there. We have a lot to learn on the progressive side. How do we talk about Zionism? We do. We have a lot of healing to do in our allyship, and we have a lot of work to realize that when we take our first steps into understanding a community, we become allies first, but we cannot yet become accomplices in their mission of self-determination. There are people who are just starting to take those first steps. And so in a painful time for you all, I also ask for grace and that space for allies to have the opportunity to learn and to come in. You know, there's a lot smarter people on this call than me. I'm honored to be called to this space, and we'll keep listening. We will keep trying to amplify your voices and your stories, because that is how we do anti-oppression work. That is how we honor the ways of our grandmothers, and that's how we return to a good way, as we would say, with my reservation and my people. So with that, wanted to create more space for everybody else. So Chimigwich, Amanda, Chimigwich, all of you on this call, I see you, I hear you, and sending you nothing but love as we take the next steps forward in such an uncertain time.
Manny, thank you so much. And for people who aren't following Manny, please do, because his solidarity has just, I don't even know how to express in words how, you know, seeing the things that Manny tweets and his courage in standing with our community and his ability to identify anti-Semitism in the complexity of all of this, and to say this is an attack on Jewish people. And you can say what you want or think what you want about the conflict, but if you are not standing in solidarity with the Jewish people, we need to talk about that. And that's hard work, and Manny does it. And I will say also, we've had hard conversations between us. We and Suhail and I have had hard conversations. You know, being an ally and standing in solidarity with someone doesn't mean you agree on everything. It means that you agree on the humanity of both of your peoples, and that you work to advance, you know, everyone together, and that you grapple with the complexity with love and respect. And so, you know, it is such a privilege to have allies like this, and to have you join us today. And I'm also so excited to introduce Daniel Eisenberg, who is a social worker by training and a seasoned Zionist youth organizer. He's now living in New York City, pursuing a master's in process-oriented psychology and conflict facilitation, and he has multiple years of facilitation experience in Jewish intergenerational trauma. And Daniel is here to spend some time with us and to share the basics of identifying and understanding our trauma, how trauma impacts us as activists and as Jews, and to offer strategies for self-care and resilience. So Daniel, it is fantastic to have you. It's safe to say we couldn't need you more. And I also just want to super quickly shout out Lauren Deutsch on our team, who put this event together, who reached out to Daniel, who really recognized immediately earlier this week that that the trauma that we are all dealing with is not normal, it's not okay, and that we need help processing it together.
Hello, everyone. Hello. It's really an honor and a privilege to be able to be here with a community of people bursting at the seams. That I mean, how amazing that not everyone can fit in the virtual room. So many people wanted to be here, to show up, and that for me already is first stage, as people have said. And working with trauma is community, and even though we're not in the same place, there's something extraordinary about being together. And I just bow to the previous speakers in tremendous humility with what Manny and Suhail and Ashanti have shared. And my accent, I'm not American, I'm British. So this is a new community for me, and I'm sort of learning the ways, but I've been very moved by what I've heard today from the previous speakers. I want to share with you today a personal story about a trauma response that I had, and then I want to talk through with you about trauma responses in general, particularly the intergenerational aspect that we as Jews carry, having had centuries of trauma in our history, in our families, and in our collective experience. And then, and this is even maybe a little bit edgy for some people, but I want to invite you to, if you feel comfortable, I'm going to guide you through a short meditation, a short inner experience work to connect with the smallest hint of the trauma response, and then find ways to ground and find resilience and our own internal lives. So that's the sort of plan that I have in the next 19 minutes or so. Does that sound okay? Yeah. And we're going to use the chat. I'd love to hear from people's voices, but on such a big call, the way that I'm going to get participation later on is for people to write in the chat. So it will be great for people to participate as much as you like when that opportunity comes later. So I want to tell a story about an experience I had in London, in the UK. This was about 3 years ago, and there was a lot of intensity in the UK with the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. You may have heard him, who was has a strong history of anti-Zionism, and he had a lot of followers who were very fervent, and there was definitely a big anxiety and a big emotional feeling in the Jewish community around anti-Semitism while he was the leader of the Labour Party. And I was in a pub in North London with some friends, having some drinks, having a nice evening, chilling, so everything, you know, what can go wrong? And then I get talking to a woman, and we have a nice, you know, we're talking, and then she talks about that she's been to Israel and Palestine, and the whole conversation starts kind of escalating, and she tells me she's a fervent supporter of Jeremy Corbyn, and suddenly we're in this very intense conversation, and within a matter of 5-10 minutes, she's telling me that Jews dine out on offering, that she says to me, what does she say? You should just keep going, you know, having dinners and dining out on your suffering. You just tell you're suffering because, you know, you want to have nice dinner party conversation. And then she said, and I was like, well, my ancestors really did suffer a lot. So it's really painful when you say that. And then she said, well, what Israel is doing to the Palestinians is exactly the same as what the Nazis did to the Jews. And it was kind of like a knife. It felt so stabbing, and it was a verbal, you know, kind of incitement at some level, but it was so difficult to hear that comparison. And I don't know if other people have experienced that sort of Holocaust inversion where Israel's actions are compared to the actions of the Nazis. And it was just really painful for me, particularly as someone who's criticized Israeli government policy before. It was very difficult to hear that accusation being thrown at me. And I noticed a trauma response inside my body that my shoulders kind of up, and I noticed my whole body kind of tensing up. And I noticed at first a desire to appease this woman. I wanted her to like me somehow, even though she was saying this horrible stuff. I wanted to kind of appease her and soften her and please her and sort of say the right thing so she would not be mean to me anymore. And then I noticed an anger in me and a desire to fight and a real kind of like, how dare you say that? And I just, my skin kind of went red and my whole body tensed up. And it was hard for me in those moments to kind of think straight. And she ended up leaving the pub, and we weren't really able to have a kind of satisfactory conversation. It had sort of gone over an edge. And I spent a long time thinking about that. Partly because it was an in-person experience, it wasn't online, but it really stuck with me of how much I was feeling in my body and how much those words and that conversation affected me in a way that, you know, some might say, oh, she's just said some words to you, you know, to get over it. But that is one voice that someone might say, but I was like, no, this is really affecting me. And I imagine people in this community, as you've been watching stuff online, you've been on social media, you may have been having similar or different experiences where your responses feel really intense. And I see Ariana is saying that she can relate. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about what was going on for me and the general idea of trauma response. And there's a really great book which I can recommend heavily to people called My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies by Resmaa Menakem. It's a really excellent book. And he is a Black man from America who speaks about racialized trauma through white supremacy, but I think it's extremely applicable also to the Jewish experience. And one of his definitions of trauma is that trauma is not primarily an emotional response. Trauma always happens in the body. Trauma, he says, is a wordless story that our body tells us about what is safe and what is a threat. And originally that came from the part of our brain, the reptilian or lizard part of our brain, which wanted to defend ourselves and wanted to know what was safe. We were in a situation of safety and danger, and we developed certain responses that determined what was safe. But as these patterns are inherited through centuries and generations, through our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, there comes to be something that Resmaa Menakem terms trauma retention. It becomes kind of anchored in our body. And therefore, it's not only in moments when we are physically facing danger. Obviously, there are people in Israel at the moment physically facing danger, but it can also be anything which is perceived as a threat to what we do, to what we say, to what we care about, to what we yearn for. And that, I think, is the sphere that a lot of people may find themselves here, that the online, social media and conversations are triggering things inside of us. They're bringing up these trauma responses, even though no one is directly pointing a gun at us. But actually, in the mind of the reptilian brain, the perceived threat can be as intense sometimes as the actual threat. And therefore, our reactions can also be very intense. And some people might say, oh, you're overreacting, it's over the top. But I think what the research around trauma and trauma response is that our body doesn't always distinguish between things so well. And so when we really feel something that is particularly anchored from generations, then we can have these responses. And to just sort of, people are responding, this is true. Fitful sleep is one consequence. Yes, sleep is definitely an area where a lot of trauma will go. If we're not processing our trauma actively and really dealing with it in our waking life, our sleeping life and our dream life will definitely process it kind of unconsciously for us. So this is also a good remedy for good sleep. I know that's something that I experience. And yeah, anxiety is a huge part of this as well. You know, feeling anxiety, like I know for me personally, when I'm an immigrant in this country applying, and even though I have all the white privilege of the immigration system, even when I come to the border officials, I get a huge amount of trauma that comes up from me because of my grandfather's experience in Nazi Germany. It's not my experience, but the inherited trauma is something that we need to work on. So, I wanted to just offer that to you, and I wanted to name these 4 kind of main headlines of trauma response. And as we go into the guided experience, I wanted to just see if these are resonant. So the 4 main ones that are talked about in the trauma field are the fight response. Alicia, I think, was mentioning the anger, the frustration, and that's a big part of the fight response. Then there's also the flight response, like someone just said, I got off social media entirely. Who said that? I just saw that in the chat. And I want to get away from it all. I need distance. I need detachment. Then there's also the freezing response, where your body kind of freezes up and you're just paralyzed because it's so difficult to know even what to do. And you go into a kind of paralysis with all the intensity that's happening. And it's very hard to even move. And that sometimes can be felt in the stomach. And it can feel very, very disabling. And then there's another response, which is the appeasement process, where you see people and you want to relate to them and you want to appease them and you want you want to kind of mollify and address their behavior in order to calm them down, and you actually ignore yourself and you focus on the other and trying to kind of reduce the risk. I hear people also talking about hopelessness, and hopelessness is definitely an emotional response, and I think it's often linked in the freezing, and a kind of an inability to move, and maybe also behind hopelessness there's a desire to kind of detach and let go and not be, it's sort of too much to be so attached to this. Fawn response, yes, fawning and appeasement is definitely a similar idea. I hear Michelle saying, I felt paralyzed by the hate-filled misinformation that's been shared. Yes, that makes sense. It can be paralyzing, definitely. And I validate all the comments that people are saying, because I think these experiences are really, really real. Alison saying, I do fawning. Right, the idea of having to prove, having to overemphasize, feeling that you have to prove yourself is also a trauma response. Yes. And there's nothing wrong in this. It's very clear to say, there's not, when you're having these responses, that is, it is natural and makes sense to be having these responses. All that I'm trying to kind of bring is an awareness around them, because when we bring a little bit more awareness, it doesn't get rid of them. I think, as Manny said, we can't sort of erase this, but we can bring a little bit more spaciousness and a little bit more awareness. And that can free us up. That awareness and that spaciousness can free us up to have the conversations, as Amanda was saying, with allies where there is disagreement, and it can also free us up to do all the things we need to do in our lives to flourish. And so that's sort of what I want to introduce now. So I'm just going to invite people to find a comfortable seated position. Some people may have done meditation, some people may have not. Whatever feels good for you, just, yeah, give it a go. But if it doesn't feel comfortable and doesn't feel right, then no pressure whatsoever. And also, if at any moment you're having a very intense reaction that feels unmanageable, please take the time, stop, and just stop the exercise if it feels unmanageable at any point. It's important really to attend to the safety, even in this short exercise. So I'm going to invite you to just close your eyes if that feels good. Connect to your body on the chair or the couch or whatever place you're sitting or lying or standing. Just feel what it's like to have your body in this place, in this moment. Notice any sounds around you. I'm going to invite you to think of something that you've heard or seen in recent days that has been difficult or upsetting for you, that has ignited something in you. Could have been something online, could have been a conversation. And just connect with the feeling in your body when you saw that or read that or heard that. Just connect to the feeling in your body. Really pay attention to it. Notice it. And as much as possible, welcome it and say, this is what's happening. This is my response. It's not good, it's not bad. It's just a response in your body. So if anyone would like to share in the chat, you know, some of the experiences that are going on, I'd be interested to hear it. They might relate. So if you just want to write in the chat 1 or 2 words about what was happening in your body, what you noticed as you went into that, so we can feel and connect with each other. Alison, you started. Oh, I'm feeling with you, Alison. Yes, the numbness, overwhelming sadness mixed with anger. There's a lot of grief here. Often behind the anger is grief. That's very true. Yeah. sadness, embarrassment. Tears from Yara. Right, Amanda Berman saying that physically I felt my chest constricting. Yes, the tightening around the chest. I felt my heart beating like Dahlia. Yes, I think the tightness in the throat, all these words that get stuck in our throat, choking sensations, the pit in my stomach, having a hard time not shutting down. Layla, just feeling defeat. Yeah, I'm feeling with you in that.
I couldn't because there's only journey.
Yeah, and then people giving Layla some support here. Headaches, yes, emptiness, not expansiveness, right? Kind of.
You asked me to transfer the money for your mom.
But I'm
I
saying,
said I
I
would.
didn't know the whole like.
We have someone who's not on mute, which is interesting.
Right.
But it's beautiful to hear about your internal family issues, but maybe you don't want us to hear about them. So you can turn off if you want, but yeah, that's okay. Yeah, sadness and betrayal and losing friends. Oh, it's very hard when relationships are fractured in this moment, and just feeling in this group a tremendous amount of feeling and wanting to honor that. Yes, it is very agitating, and there's a lot going on. And then gratitude for this community. And I think on that point, I wanted to mention in my story that I told when I had this experience. So I was in this pub in North London, and there were 2 or 3 other Jewish people there. And I just said to them, can I sit with you at the side? And I sat with these 2 or 3 other Jewish people after having this very intense trauma response in my body. And I just talked to them. They listened. They didn't say that much, but just sitting with 2 or 3 other Jewish people inside this pub was so healing and so just what I needed in that moment. And I needed also to do more work. I saw a therapist afterwards and worked on it because it was so alive in me. But the community and the coming together and the quickness of the response is already a big part of the holding and the healing that I think we need in a moment like this. And I wanted to just offer, though, some other techniques in order to find resilience in this moment, because as much as we have the inherited trauma from our ancestors, we have tremendous inherited resilience from the many, many generations of Jews that have gone before us, who have lived through tremendous difficulty and have still carried on and have still loved and have lived. And so I want to just invite you to come back into your body, and we're going to do a tiny little exercise to just find a way to meet some of that response in the body. So as you go back into your body, back into the chair, or wherever you're standing or sitting, just feeling with your body, remembering that feeling you had, be it however it was in the body, whatever feelings were coming up. And just, I'm going to invite you to bring in an ancestor of yours. Could be someone who's living, could be someone who's dead, it could be a historical figure, someone that could come to you and meet you in this moment. So I'm inviting you to bring this person in. Imagine their body and their presence. If you can, feel in your body what their body is like. Try and just, are they old and hunched? Are they young and tall and proud? Or are they old and proud or young and hunched? Whatever body experience that they have, try and just become that and connect to it. And if there's a little gesture that emerges with your hand, just find a gesture that captures a little something of this ancestor, of this person. And let them come to you. And let that gesture be directed towards you as a little gift to yourself in this moment, with all this pain and difficulty. Yeah. So I'd appreciate if anyone wanted to share in the chat, you know, something that came up for them, something that was supporting them in this moment, who was there for them, who are the allies in our own history and in our own internal life that can be there for us. And yes, Sarah says, my grandmother, who had the best laugh and the strongest grip of all. Yeah. So we have some grandmothers coming up, strong figures. Yeah. Frummer. Yeah. Yes, and I hear Mike's question around what does this have to do with the present situation? And although it can feel difficult to be doing this when there's such an urgent situation going on in Israel, this is part of our way of responding, because if we're healthy and if we're attending to our trauma, we can be more present, I believe, for those that are suffering, and we can show up more actively. We have to kind of look after ourselves and be our own shelters. Like people in Israel are going into shelters, we got to find our own internal shelter. How can we protect from the barrage of social media? And I think that these kind of activities, even just 1 or 2 minutes, can be really helpful in a moment of overwhelm, in a moment of trauma response, to say, I can find a shelter for myself. I can connect with an ancestor. I can connect with. Another great strategy for resilience is a nature spot. Could have also gone on that, but connecting to a place in nature, could be a place in Israel you visited or anywhere in the world, can be really powerful. Just wanting to really honor all the ancestors that are coming into the chat, people who've survived the pogroms, people who fought in the Haganah, grandmother Lily from Margaret, so many people. And I noticed bravery and love as sort of this amazing combination of fierceness and also deep love. Wow, amazing to know that all these people are metaphorically with us now and are also supporting us in this work. And I imagine for so many people here, part of the reason you're doing this work is because of a connection to your ancestry and to honor them. And so I think I appreciate just reading and hearing some of the names that have been mentioned, and just thank you for sharing in that way. I know it can be vulnerable. And Mordechai Anilevich, a famous figure, the strength, definitely bringing that response of fighting, and that sometimes fighting is a necessary response, but also just to be aware of fighting inside of us. Do we need to fight in this moment? Or are there other responses that are maybe more helpful? And so, Sarah saying thank you. Yes. Yeah, tears I think are really part of this. I really think crying can be so valuable, and sometimes we want to hold it all together. But in that holding it together, we put a lot of strain on us and stress on ourselves. So letting it go and letting the tears come out can be a great help in this time. Yeah. And being able to to cry alone is sometimes different from crying in community. And so I hope today that we've had some space to feel together and feel the deep, deep feelings that are present in this group, and to know that other people, that people are definitely not alone with what they're feeling. Yes, iPad 4, I don't know who that is, but is feeling isolated, and whatever your name is, if you want to write your name, I just feel, yeah, I'm glad that you've had some solidarity here. Yeah. Miriam, thank you, Miriam. Yeah. Well, I think I've been speaking for around, well, a little bit over 20 minutes now, so I think it might be time to wrap up. I just want to check in with Amanda.
I just want to thank you, Daniel. That was amazing. And it is amazing to see in the chat how many people needed it. And I knew I needed it, and I knew everyone else needed it. But now that we've done it, I still feel like we could do it for so many more hours. What I really want to say, and I've been looking at what's in the chat, and I've also been texting with Alicia, who kicked us off, and he said, you know, I hope I was good. I hope I said what you wanted me to say. And the answer that I gave him is, we're all feeling so many feelings. And right now I want to cry. And he started and he was angry. And when I hear Manny and Suhail and Ashanti, I just want to hug them and tell them, and like, there's not enough words to express how grateful I am for them. And so there's such a range of emotions that we're all feeling. And I think that's okay. And the anger is there. It's very real. The sadness for the loss of human life on both sides is real. And then the fear and trauma of the anti-Semitism that we're experiencing that isn't even about that is also real. So I just want everyone to know that it's okay to sit in that. And, you know, I know a lot of people have been emailing us saying, why isn't there more posting from Zioness? Why aren't you doing this and this and this? And it's because we're experiencing the trauma on our team too. And we're doing our best, and we are doing more, and there's resources coming for all of you, but this was sort of a necessary thing for us too. So again, I really want to thank Lauren Deutsch for putting this together, and I really hope everyone else, you know, felt as the catharsis that I feel hearing from Daniel and the solidarity that I feel from our friends. And Lauren is going to close for us. And I just really want to say you can always reach out to Zioness, and that is the point of our community. And what Daniel said, which is that we have to do this so we can get back out there, because this week really has been paralyzing, but like, we have a mission here and it's important, and we do have allies, and there are people who care about us. And if we go into our corners and just cry, you know, forever, we won't be doing what we need to do, which is telling people our story and telling people what Zionism means to us and why it means that to us, and why our hearts are there and our families and our loved ones who are safe need our support. And that doesn't mean that we don't also support Palestinian lives, but that we need people to stand with us now, and we will continue to stand with them, but we really need their solidarity. And if we're just so busy crying and holding on to our trauma, then we're not going to be doing what will ultimately protect us in the future. So thank you. And Lauren, you're up.
Okay, thank you so much, Amanda. I draw strength, my trauma resilient strategy is to draw strength from our people. So this was really helpful to me. And Daniel, I really want to thank you. Healing with our ancestors was not something that would have occurred to me, and it was a really powerful strategy. I think a lot about our Jewish history and our shared traditions, and I hadn't really thought about my specific ancestors and their resilience and how I could draw on that. So thank you. So I just put a few thoughts together that I wanted to share with you all. Drawing on Jewish tradition, Ruth Bader Ginsburg of blessed memory was known for quoting our Torah, Tzedek, tzedek tildof, justice, justice, you shall pursue, lema'an techiyeh, that you shall live, ve'yirashta et haaretz, and inherit the land. And everybody starts with tzedek, tzedek tildof, justice, justice, you shall pursue, but forgets the second part, that the pursuit of justice, the ongoing process of justice, that is what gives us life. And that is what brings us to living in the land of Israel, to liberation and sovereignty and self-determination in the land of Israel. The Torah uses the same verb, hildof, rodef, to pursue, to describe an early leader of the Jewish people, Aaron HaKohen, the first high priest. It was said that he loved peace and he pursued peace. To be a leader of the Jewish people, one does not achieve peace, but rather pursues peace. Peace is not a static end state. Peace is a dynamic process that a Jewish leader must constantly undertake, and the love of peace should animate every step. To me, the pursuit of both peace and justice is what it means to be a Jew. As we hear calls for war and violence, let us love peace. As we watch with broken hearts the loss of life, fear, pain, and suffering in our homeland, let us pursue peace. As our people are under fire in Zion, let us pursue justice, that we may live in the land of Israel in safety, sovereignty, and liberation. Shabbat Shalom, friends. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom. Am Yisrael Chai.
Am Yisrael Chai.